Oops. Hi, guys. Hi, Angel. Hi, Shannon.
Should I put it on video?
Hi, Jenna. You're attending with Angel. Hi, Holly. Hi. You guys out on a walk?
Yeah. Yes, we're out on a
So
walk.
nice. Are you going to walk during the whole meeting? I love it.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep. We're going to go on mute,
Hang on,
but
I can't hear you, but
that's probably me.
let me see if I can unmute you.
No, I am.
Okay, I can't hear you, but I love to see you guys. Hi. All right, hang on. Let me.
Are you in here? Is it in your ear?
Martine and
I turned off my
Sam.
video.
How do you hear that?
How do I hear what?
Hi, Sam. Hi, Martine.
Oh, Sam logged in.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Is it in your ear?
No. Where the hell is the sound? You can't hear her?
Okay. No, I can't either. I don't hear. I thought maybe it was like
Is it in?
So
Yeah.
I know we're like right on time, which is crazy that I'm rarely on time. You
It
guys
is.
know
Like,
that
I heard
probably
that.
by now. But while we're waiting for everyone to jump on, I am curious about for those of you who are kind of caught up and who came to the last conflict meeting, which is kind of like our part one of tonight's discussion. If you have any questions or just even like some reflections or thoughts since, please feel free to share them. If anything was confusing, I had a lot of you guys said that it really made sense, but a few of you said it was slightly confusing. So
Where'd you see
Angel, let me see if I can.
No, she's not. She's creeping on the Mallory
I can
page.
hear you.
Yeah. She puts on her. So I'm like, you already
Hi,
Mallory
Marguerite.
page? And she asked me about something.
Hi.
Like, am I there?
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Just give me a little heads up. Okay. Yes.
This is very low.
I think we can hear everybody that's off mute.
No, it's Shannon. Let me see if I can. Are you muted? Okay. Yeah, feel free to unmute if you guys have questions or if there's anything that's like unsettled about our last meeting and discussion.
No, you're not.
Well, I'm so glad that for this group so far, it's all gelled. Seems like you guys you're destined to just absorb Syntropy and integrate it immediately. Or you already have it in your cells. Is that Ayana? I see. Hi, sweet girl. Hello, beautiful. Oh, and is that Justin? Let me see. Oh, there's Marcella and Ayana. Hi, guys. You can unmute. I'm going to wait. I'm going to give people a few minutes. So if you guys have any questions, if you want to just discuss anything that's been going on, this was an intense week energetically, I felt. So if anyone wants to hop in and share some thoughts with that, please feel free.
I would second that.
I think it was definitely a.
Marguerite, you have some thoughts?
Oh, just I agree. I think it was an intense week
Hang
energetically.
on. Oh, I know what it is. You guys are talking and I can't hear you. Hang on a second. 1 second. That's what it is. I set up my settings incorrectly. Just hold on a second. Hopefully you guys aren't getting feedback from my sound. Yes, that's what it is. Speaker, microphone, it's input, output. Can somebody try talking? I want to see.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, sorry. Angel, it was me. Of course. That's not a shocker. Okay, I can hear you now. Am I feeding back or anything? Because I have a microphone.
I just agree with you. I think that it was crazy week energetically.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, totally. Yeah, I felt the energy. That it was crazy week. That's what I'm saying. Let's share. Anything specifically about this week for you?
Like lots of insomnia.
Mm.
Could not sleep and just couldn't turn off my brain and so that feels like too much energy and and just lots of energy even in even in Wednesday's class, like the kids had lots of energy going in lots of different directions and stuff.
Yeah.
Like hard to and yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just normal. I don't know.
Well, what is normal exactly, right?
Yeah, right.
We aren't always moving through phases. Yeah, but no, with this seasonal shift, and then, there's energetic shifts going on. There's, bad news that comes out. There's all kinds of energies mixing, but I definitely agree with you that I feel that there are times when it's more intense than others. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How are you? We're talking about this last week energetically and how it was for everyone. So Marguerite was saying she had a little insomnia and felt some strong energy. How about you?
Let me think back to this past week. Yeah. I think I just felt like a little more tired and like at times like just like different emotions of feeling kind of like down. The emotions that are like harder to enjoy having.
Oh yeah. Not
I'm gonna
all
be
from emotion.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna be getting Ivy ready in a few minutes, so I'm just gonna listen in.
That's okay. So let me just tell you guys now that we're a few minutes in, there are a few people who are going to be hopping in, but I want to tell you about the structure of this evening because I want to move through it really efficiently and then I'll hang out longer because I want to start to offer some coaching time. And I call it coaching time, but really it's like a time for the expression of an experience, like a relevant experience that is alive for you in this moment that we can put a syntropic perspective on and help create a space for processing. Because that's really what I feel like I do for people is I create this kind of, wide angle lens that that helps with, because all of us are seeing our own angle. We're all these like angles of this whole of life that we're in. And when you sit with somebody who can hold a space, and especially with the space of Syntropy, which I just like, I feel like it was just already built in me. So when I learned of this really like objective, observed perspective, because for those of you guys who are still catching up with Syntropy, the idea is it's not an opinion, really. It is certainly a choice of a perspective, but it's an observable set of standards and rules and concepts that are all observable in nature. It's nature's operating system. So if you're to look at the way nature does things and you apply the human experience to or you apply it to the human experience, that would be Syntropy. It's like this screen. And its tenets are really beautiful. But that being said, last class, I almost shared with you guys this pop song. It's called Life is Fun. I can't remember the name. It's like a YouTuber who like has this song. But I used to say, I taught the students 2 years ago, I think I played it to them, and it was this Syntropy Entropy song. But, it's so funny. I'm glad that it didn't work because it's very much like pessimist, optimist. And entropy, which is the opposite of syntropy, which is our whole So the laws of thermodynamics, right? The dynamics of energetic movement in the universe, this, physics that we were all taught is essentially based on entropic views that, believe it or not, are actually false. So when you look at nature, most of these views in physics have been essentially usurped by or transcended by more modern physics. Whether you call it quantum physics, now we're into beyond quantum physics, but essentially physics that looks into the really, really, really tiny and really zeroes in shows us that syntropy and syntropic perspectives, quantum mechanics is also interchangeable with syntropy, that actually is provable and true and has yet to be disproven. It's entropy that is really completely false. But our entire societies, our entire belief systems, the way we were raised, the way we were educated, every single thing has happened inside of this lens of entropy. And so entropy looks a little bit more like a war consciousness, a scarcity consciousness. There won't be enough. I have to compete. It's very survival based. So it's really tapping into like kind of the animal parts of us. And animals are like a mixture. They're influenced in the natural world, or kind of when we observe the qualities of animals, they embody, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, but then the animals takes it a step further, because we almost start to see this emergence of this animating energy and this life force and this soul, which I would argue, and if anyone has ever seen the documentary, The Mind of Plants, which is phenomenal, plants do have this vital energy too. But plants really reflect, and the way plants work really reflect nature and like how nature does things. Humans and animals, we kind of bring in these like stories and kind of survival mechanisms, and humans really start to transcend and take and elevate the capacity of animals, because we have this compassion and emotion. And not to say that isn't present in animals, but when we look through Syntropy's lens, we see that there's this unlimited potentiality that we as humans can create with. And that's why I absolutely love to study and apply Syntropy to just like our everyday stuff, because we really were not taught this way, and it does take some practice. So even if some of the things, I can guarantee you that some of the things that I say and that I share with you and that we discuss in these meetings are going to be things that you've heard before, but I encourage you to stick with them and to stay out of the place of trying to know, and more in the place of trying to like sense and almost practice. Because it's one thing to know something, and we talk about this with the students of Soul to Soil all the time, that to know something is nice, but ultimately wisdom comes from experience. To live through something, to walk through it, to train in it, to practice it is an entirely different thing. So this topic that we discussed last time, so we talked about conflict, because really what's relevant in our lives more than that? I don't know. I feel like that, it became really clear last year, although I'm sure we were aware of it, Marguerite. I'm sure you would agree too, even in year 1 of Soul to Soil, now we're in year 3, that, conflict, we have this idea of, oh, this is what we're teaching and this is what we're sharing, but then the kids are getting into these little spats and these little fights, and then we're having our own inner conflicts because I was so excited to bring this to them and none of them are listening, and you know what I mean? Like, there's so many, there's so much budding of like opposing forces that happen in life. And what's so interesting to me is that is actually what makes life interesting. That, I mean, show me a story that isn't incredibly boring, that doesn't have some kind of conflict, some kind of contrast in the story. But what's difficult when we are living and operating via an entropic operating system, that scarcity, survival instinct, competition, not enoughness, I have to fight, way of looking at things, instead of the syntropic, well, you know what? Syntropy, oh, and sorry, to loop it back to that song, Syntropy and entropy aren't exactly like positive and negative. Positive and negative exist in Syntropy, and it's not an either or kind of a consciousness. It's more like, if I look this way, I see Syntropy, and if I turn my back, I see entropy. And imagine that. So they're like complete flips. They're inversions. of one another. And in Syntropy, of course, there's positive and negative. Of course, there's good, bad. In I don't know how many of you have been on this spiritual awakening journey or like personal development and have heard people say things like, oh, well, humans live in this duality, this dualistic universe, and there is really no such thing as bad, and I would disagree with that because, like, I don't know how many of you guys have ever like been really harmed, but like, I don't know, harm is bad to me. And, one could call that just a judgment, and that, transcending judgment is an important part of our development. But Syntropy is not just like all rainbows and butterflies and rose-colored glasses. And I did teach it that way a little bit at first. So I just want to make that distinction, that when we talk of Syntropy, it is really a beautiful perspective. But beauty and love, when we speak of it in these conversations, it really means wholeness. And I'm going to leave that until the middle of this talk. So the way that I want to frame this talk is I'm going to read you guys a little story. So those of you who are on a walk, those of you who are just sitting and relaxing or in the middle of something, just do me a favor and just tune in. You do not have to speak, but then I am going to ask you to have a little bit of a lesson. We're going to go over the concept of universe, some of these terms that we're talking about, the concept of love, just so you guys see what are your kids learning? What does it mean to define these things through this lens of Syntropy? And I want to bring you into these, I say definitions, but I say that loosely because they're not meant to be fixed, right? They're these ever evolving ways of relating with these concepts that we can then apply to our everyday reality. Because the truth is that, like I said, the science that we were raised in is entropic and actually is false, because it doesn't include, it's like almost like we were taught through this keyhole. And when, entropy can only exist and be true through this keyhole, the minute you widen your lens, you're going to see things that actually falsify what you thought you saw. So Syntropy is about expanding a viewpoint. And when we perform science, or we make scientific observations and perform experiments and draw conclusions and observation, those of you who don't know a tremendous amount about my career, that's kind of how I started, was in public health and conducting research and understanding the ins and outs of that, which from an institutional, very dogmatic standpoint, but still objectively, I learned how science is carried out and conducted, particularly in the health sciences. But when we do that and we ignore spirit, energy, the idea that this whole like physical form that I'm in right now is a form of energy. It's not energy or matter. It's matter is a phase of energy condensation. Hang on, Gary just joined. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a little reading, then we're going to discuss universe and ether, and then I want to, and we're going to loop in this whole idea of conflict. I'm going to do a quick review of what I feel was a really essence-based piece of how I explained this other way of relating to conflict, because conflict is like the drama. It's kind of the fun in life in a way, and it can be a lot more fun than I think humans make it, because I don't know if we make it so fun all the time. So we're going to talk about that. I'll loop that into these lessons that I teach the kids. And then I really want to, and I want to involve you in that part. So I really would love for you guys to unmute, if it's not super noisy, to answer my questions. You guys are going to be like, almost like the students, like your kids. I'm going to ask you questions and I'm going to ask you to provide feedback. And then without, no need for right or wrong. This is not a right or wrong kind of place. You have to be correct. This is just, we're feeling into these concepts. And then I want to finish with you guys bringing to me some stuff, like whether it's some rumor about some crazy vibrational energy on October 4th, or it's just it's a conflict, like your kids are driving you crazy because they're fighting all the time and you don't like how you're showing up and you're shaming yourself like crazy because of it, or whatever. Okay, an illness thing. Marissa, I don't understand this whole thing about you don't believe in germs, and my kid can't stop talking about how I'm wrong about germs and contagion. Whatever it is that you are curious about, this is your place to bring it here, and I will answer, or I can support you in resolving through this lens of Syntropy. Are we good? Everybody got the format? Okay. So I'm going to start by reading you a passage from this book called Getting Back on Track. One of my beautiful teachers, actually a homeopath, an Australian homeopath who had a clinic for many, many years, like 50 years, with her husband, who's a chiropractor and osteopath. They've done beautiful work together, but her beliefs she's very spiritually scientific. So super scientific because she ran a clinical practice. So listen, anyone who has run a clinical practice for 50 years has seen some stuff. Okay. They've seen, they've collected data and they've been able to notice trends and patterns and all these kinds of things. So she's super scientific, even from the conventional sense, but then she has this really beautiful connection with the universe and energy and all of these other forces. And she believes that there are underlying tethers beneath the experience, the human experience, that keep us in disease, war. All the banes of our existence essentially are caused by what she calls these guilts. So I'm going to read to you from her beautiful words. All right, so certain untrue beliefs and attitudes prevail throughout the world. Because of the helplessness effects of some of these attitudes and beliefs, we have allowed the development of an insidious, destructive curse that is crippling the Western world and destroying our mental and physical strength of the individuals of whole nations. All right, so a little blurb on beliefs and emotions. And just a reminder, last talk, we discussed that when in conflict, this initial superficial layer of conflict, forces interacting, we're going to call that controversy. It's kind of like the surface drama and the place where a lot of times our minds attach to when trying to resolve conflict, which causes some issues. The perspective that drives our approach to a conflict creates issues, but also the controversy. And that is usually determined by the level of controversy is determined by, or it's related to, how many bond breaking beliefs that we hold. And I'll review that again when we talk about the nature perspective later. All right, we are trained in childhood to a lot of false beliefs, which alter our view of life and change our enjoyment of it. We all have different backgrounds and life experiences. Many attitudes are based on ingrained false beliefs held by whole societies, whole groups, or subgroups of people, and it is very difficult from within the group to see that everyone may be wrong. Psychiatrists call this phenomenon consensus reality, a framework of values and judgments in which religion, science, culture, and education all contribute to a coherent worldview. Consensus reality varies from society to society. Certain very strongly held community-taught unhealthy ideas are actually causing considerable deterioration, not only in the health of individuals, but also in the state of health of the planet. These attitudes and beliefs are taught by emotional manipulation, fear-mongering, blackmail, controlling by guilt. Many also arise out of attitudes to death and fear of life and death. All inhibit joy and love and invite the presence of anger, hate, greed, vengeance, fear, and grief. Ignorance is the major reason. So those energies, anger, hate, greed, vengeance, fear, grief, we're going to call those the ghosts. Okay. Like I've been talking to your kids a little bit. I don't know how much they've shared with you about ghosts, because this is like a really big, super alive in the imagination of our kids. And my goal is always to just shed light, to like bring it to the surface, and not necessarily bleach, cleanse it with light, but just talk about these kind of these feelings that haunt us. Right. So then we're going to go on. And just bear with me, okay? This is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but I promise it's worth it. It's really beautiful how she paints the picture of where this lives for us as humanity. It is our beliefs that generate unhealthy emotions, i.e., any emotion that is not adding life and vitality to your cells, but instead has the power to undermine your vitality. False beliefs about the true nature of life create our fears, griefs, anger, and indeed all of our guilts. It surprises me that so little attention has been made to this widespread and insidious aspect of dis-ease, considering that there is hardly a soul alive on the planet who is not afflicted with guilt in one way or another. Perhaps it is our very guilt itself that stops us from seeing the magnitude of the scourge and creates a veil through which enlightenment and insight are slow to penetrate. Guilt overlies many attitudes and emotions. When I talk of guilt, I mean bad conscience in many different ways. A sense of having sinned. Okay, so these are the specific contexts. Okay, so try to see if this can seep in and see where you relate with this. A sense of having sinned, a sense of shame, of embarrassment, of grievance, even of grief. We suffer from guilt over not doing what is expected of us, over doing what others expected of us against our own instincts, over things done and things undone, feelings felt and feelings left unfelt, over right and wrong, even over pleasure at our own successes or joy in loving relationships. For many, even being alive and daring to breathe brings its own guilt. I have my sister-in-law suffers from this because she worked in the World Trade Center and was late to work on September 11th. And this is like, it's like still alive for her. I wish I could have these conversations. It's not invited, so I don't, but like, it's just, these are things that even on they're so specific, the angles of how we experience these and how these are in the background whenever we are in controversy, in conflict, and even just when we're making decisions, right? But specifically, we're talking about conflict. So see where this lives for you. Some are guilty over eating too well, too often, too little, over not giving proper respect to their body's requirements, leading to guilt over being too fat, too thin, having poor skin, body odor, and many forms of elimination problems. Some are guilty over grief issues. If I only had or hadn't done blank, thinking to have averted some death or suffering. Some suffer a lifetime of grief and guilt over a parent. Over parent or self not having come up to expectations. On a broader scale, those in responsible positions suffer many guilts over having in the course of their jobs to make decisions or take actions that disadvantage or upset others. Medical practitioners know all about it. Many a drug has been guiltily removed from the market after destructive effects having been discovered. Many a judge has had to live with having made judgments that, although technically legally correct, he has felt were morally unjust or harsh. One of the most fascinating things about guilt is the way we can be made to feel guilty about not feeling guilt. Guilt benefits only the one who wants power over others, never the guilt sufferer. So power seekers for many centuries have succeeded in keeping power over people through the relentless application of guilt and fear. It's very relevant in our time. Churches have, to the present day, been the most guilty of this. Through the use of dogma or hellfire or eternal damnation, fear dominates a large percentage of the world's social customs, and guilt is its inevitable accompaniment. We will have to pay. We have been told for centuries with damnation if we take pleasure in such things as fine food, good company, fun, music, dancing, prosperity, loving relationships, and work. Serious business work, often used to offset the guilt of enjoyment. So therefore acceptable as part payment for our sins and scarcely something to have fun at. The enthusiast in his work is regarded as something of a crackpot and a danger to his mates who guilty might be expected to work harder. We must always take good note of what others, church, government, gods, family, neighbors, or simply they think is best for us. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is interpreted as, I've done you a favor, so now you owe me one. It is better to give than to receive. It is another common teaching. How can it be if you deny the recipient the pleasure of receiving, thinking he must immediately give back in order to regain some level of grace? And why is self-denial better than deserving as much as the next? If we take a stand at any time and start acting outside of guilt, especially if it appears to disadvantage someone else, we are immediately judged and judged harshly, and the guilt flag starts flying thick and fast. By this means then we see that guilt is self-perpetuating, feeding on itself. Having started the ball rolling many centuries ago, modern man has succeeded in creating himself guiltier and guiltier. We have even come to accept it as a normal state of living. Why has this state of being become the norm? Why do we put so much emphasis on what others think, inevitably to our own detriment? By what right does anyone else know what is best for me? How can he possibly know when only I know the fullness of my own experiences, my own hopes and intentions for myself, the range of experiences I need for my own development? Who else can judge and find me wanting in any respect, not being in possession of full knowledge of these things? And therefore, by what right do I hand over my personal power to others and allow their judgments and opinions to take control of my life? How did we ever come? Right, so this is coming to an end. How did we ever come to lose the intuitive sense of knowing what is best for us, what is right for ourselves in what we do and how we do it, and the courage to stand by this knowingness no matter what? So this is where I want to just highlight this idea of conflict resolution, because whether it's a spat between siblings or us and our kids or our spouse or our, the guy who's, driving on, up right behind me in my car, and what is that called? I'm totally losing the tailgating. Tailgating. It's these stories. It's these guilt stories that are actually present when we're seeing the thing that we're seeing, and they're influencing what we're seeing, and they're driving how we respond and react to it. So this author, Jill Turlin, she said, I believe that guilt is at the basis of all loss of self-value, self-esteem, personal power, self-trust, self-love, self-honor, and our loss of faith in the God within. That this loss has resulted in our creation of the world as it is today. Recurring patterns of war, famine, financial greed, and imbalance in the world's resources, insularity of nations, tribes, and families, isolation, even within these groups, leading to the breakdown of love and forgiveness in relationships. All these would not exist were it not for the guilt that each one feels of one kind or another. By guilt, I do not mean remorse. So this is a really important distinction, right? Because when we talk about guilt, actually, I think it's this week's lesson with the kids, we're going to talk about guilt versus accountability. She uses remorse. Remorse is an acknowledgement that some harm has been done, a sense of guilty sorrow. The guilts that are perpetuating strife in the world, on the other hand, are for most part not registering in the conscious thinking of man, which is why they are so difficult to alter without enlightened help. So, it makes me think of, if I'm told to believe something about, it's my fault that I did this thing that I didn't even mean to do, I didn't even know I was doing it, and I really can't even process that I did something wrong. I have to be told. And let's think about this almost like as your inner child, or as our children. If I'm being barked at that I did something wrong, or this is how I should feel, or that, this is why I'm guilty, and maybe even if I'm told in a nice way, but it doesn't register, like it doesn't immediately go, oh yeah, I smacked him on the head and he's got a red bump, and oops, like that's really, I don't want to, and he's crying that I made him upset, that hurt him. Okay, I'm sorry. If it's something that we have to like coach them and tell them, and well, you got to understand, this is how you have to be. And we're taking ourselves, our kids, out of our central alignment, our intuition, our sense of right and wrong, of harm and no harm, or love and unlove. We're taking ourselves off center, and our whole societies are built on this. All of us very honoring the nuance of all of our various upbringings. All of us were raised with this stuff. I mean, I will tell you, in the health field, it's completely true. You have to go to, some authoritative figure. You have to go to a screening procedure for somebody to tell you what's going on in your body. How more detached can we possibly be from ourselves and our intuitive sense? And again, like it's a little bit of a cleanup, right? That disentangling these beliefs takes, but just conceptually seeing that when we're in conflict, there's a lot more going on than what we see. So when I talk about controversy, it's almost more important to allow a conflict to be an expression event. And that's what we talked about. That was the conclusion from last time, essentially, that like if we could let go of the outcome for a little while, like put it on hold, put a pin in things, let them kind of play out, which is why Soul to Soil doesn't have like a discipline policy per se. We don't have hard and fast rules with regard to conduct and behavior, other than the do unto others, but not like, I do something for you, you owe me. The do unto others, like respect others, don't, let's not harm. Let's be in the context. Let's feel into our environment. It's a sensory type of way of relating to behavior. And that's why our program is so beautifully set up to support your children in their conflict resolution. And they might not reach resolution in every peace talk, but we have the space and the fluidity of the way we're set up to honor these things. That, like what I was saying, what we learned last year, and Lauren, I know, you hopped on after I had started this thought with Marguerite, that what was so crazy is I thought I was creating this program to teach one thing. And what ended up happening was conflict resolution became like priority number one. There was so much learning for the parties involved in conflict and everyone witnessing. There was so much healing that was happening, and this need for it to be fluid rather than like buttoned up and, okay, let's have court in session. Let's rule on this right now. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like this rush for resolution has two kids saying an inauthentic sorry, and then, no awareness reached, right? No shift in, certainly in behavior, but in their consciousness and their relationship with themselves. And, before I read this last really beautiful paragraph, self-value, self-esteem, personal power, self-trust, self-love, self-honor, and faith in the God within. Well, I mean, like, that's the mission statement of Soul to Soil. So what we're talking about here is so relevant in our day-to-day. It's relevant in our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our world, our relationship with our kids, how we support our kids. And I literally created the program for this and had no idea that the answer to it was in how we support conflict, that we throw around these words, emotional intelligence and, intuition. We throw around these terms, but do we really know when we're called to build that wisdom, to turn knowledge, or even desire? Because most of us, we wish we wanted to trust ourselves. We don't actually trust ourselves yet. Like, look how many false stories we fall into in our world. And we don't even know that they're false. How do we even know? We have to. How many things in your life do you just kind of like take in and believe because that's just what everybody believes? It's like the consensus reality, like psychologists call it. It's just it's the widely accepted truth from the collective consciousness. And because of that, when it comes into conflict with your instinct, and you are in a moment where something that you do or say, somebody says, well, that's wrong, well, that's bad. I do this all the time with my kids, and I'm like so aware and I'm in practice of it. But man, like I'm so uncomfortable with the idea of them saying something or doing something that could hurt someone or be interpreted as something that is painful or wrong, using a word that is incendiary, or that's going to send them into some, political correctness or, social correctness battle, and have them feeling shamed. Like, there's this energy of prevention, and it's all because there's just deep levels of guilt energy that's like, it's like baked in to my being. So I wanted to bring that here because I believe that those are the monsters. Those are the guilt. Our children come in with inherited, energies, and, whatever your beliefs are about, soul cycling and past lives, or just genetics or whatever. It doesn't matter, because we all know, just inheritance, genetics, that's the most widely accepted source of this kind of like this pattern that is lived out in familial lines. These energies are passed down, and they're present regardless of the circumstance. In a conflict, when that opportunity, that sacred opportunity is there, that we all just like wish we could just get on with our day and not have to deal with, right? This conflict that pops up, it has almost nothing to do with the thing that you think it is, the thing that you're speaking to, the thing that you're hearing in the bickering between the parties. And this is what our media does. Everybody just talks above what's really going on. And so this brilliant homeopath that I've studied from for such a long time, she her life's work is in using homeopathy specifically to help release the entanglement, the tethering, the emotional weight of some of these things, so that we can then go through this conscious reprogramming. Oh man, I see this belief. Marguerite, I'm with you with the insomnia, and I wouldn't call it insomnia, but for quite a long time now, for about 4 to 6 weeks, I've been very, very aware of my dreams. I've been, in kind of like wake state for more of a prolonged time than normal. And I'm usually like out like a light for the night. And it's so funny because I've supported insomnia homeopathically with clients for a really long time. Like I had a period in my practice where it was like every single person was an insomnia case. And so I saw so many different angles and the nuance in how that symptom presentation presents. But I've been in such a long phase because I haven't even been treating it. I haven't been trying to make it go away because it's teaching me so much about these ghosts that live within me at night and that come out of my subconscious. And I'm really showing up to see them so that I can clear them. And some of them are the most like banal, like just everyday, guilt. But, when you're in that grip of sleep, it's like, you can't escape. You can't just run and distract. I'm not going to like go on my phone, or go, do a project or get involved in something. I'm really trying to be present and aware of it so that I can really see it. And the weight of it is so much deeper in the dark, in the night, in that part of the day where the moon is ruling, where the magnetism of emotion and thoughts are so alive, where we don't have the action and the movement of the daylight going on. So when if we're to transcend this discussion about conflict from the previous message, which was expression, like let it be, like let the conflict happen. I know it's annoying, you got stuff to do, and especially if like the fists are swinging, because that's definitely happened in my house. You want to try to see if you can help whomever you're supporting, if it's you or the other, to release emotion and focus on that, right? But like we rush to the conflict, we rush to what are we going to do about it? What was wrong, what was right, what was this shouldn't happen, or this is what should have happened instead. And I'm so guilty of this, or remorseful, let's just say, of this in my parenting journey, and just even in just living as a woman, that we just like, if we remove the rush, if we just take time and space, and allow for expression, so that the story that underlies the surface, opposition, the clashing of forces or whatever, perspectives, angles, if we take time and space and allow for expression, then the next step is to look at these ghosts, look at the guilts, right? Look at the programs that our kids have adopted that have them projecting their beliefs onto, whoever it is, or us, somebody projecting onto us projecting our guilt onto someone else. A lot of times when I'm in conflict with my kids, it's because I'm in a rush. I have somewhere to be. I'm under the pressure of life, whether it's financial pressure or some kind of a failure, feeling guilty over not being enough. I think it was our first presentation, I had a typo in the presentation. And when I went to go review it, like, I can't even tell you the emotional magnetism that was awakened in me. Like, I have so much guilt over grammar. It's ridiculous, so this is the goal of tonight, to bring your awareness to like these swirling energies, these haunting energies that are present in conflict, that make the little, whatever the thing is, whatever the issue is, that, we feel righteous and we feel great standing up for and making it about that. And then telling a friend, and can you believe, don't you think I'm right? It's not about that. It's just, if we can take space from that and see what is actually being activated, what are the bond breaking beliefs that we hold, that's really where the magic is. And I just, because I have an exclamation point with a heart at the bottom, I'm going to read this last paragraph, but I can't remember. For it is strange but true that once we release guilt from participation, we cease to participate in war. Okay, so like the guilt of showing up to war. Like, how many times do you like yell at your kids and you're like, oh my God, I am the worst. Like, and especially those of us on a spiritual journey, when you know like how much you mess up your kids when you project onto them, and you criticize, and then you have your like dragon moment, and you're just like, I am the worst. Oh my God, they're screwed up forever. Now they're in therapy, and that's it. I'm done. They're over 7 years old. That's it. Like, I screwed them up. Like that, that's such a, and this is from like, these are the positive, programs that we're supposed to be reinstalling, and they're not. Like, it's just more guilt, food. Oh, I took out gluten and I feel so guilty. Like, every time I crave a burger with a bun, it's just like, there's so many guilts, whether you're on like the healthy side or the unhealthy side, right? So remove the guilt of ill treatment and we cease to ill treat. Remove the guilt from apathy and loss of love, and the love returns. Remove the guilt from grief, and the grieving one can put the past behind and get on with the game in hand. Remove the guilt from poverty, and the impoverished begin to take charge of themselves. Remove the guilt from the controllers, and they will cease to need to control. Remove the guilt over ceaseless argument, and conflict dissolves. Remove the guilt over feeling hopeless, and hope is rekindled. Remove the guilt from being afraid or terrified, and a healthy confidence in oneself and the processes of life replaces it. So I just really felt like she spoke to the point as I was contemplating sharing this with you. She so beautifully did this, and she beautifully shares a lot of things in here. But curious, so just unmute. Any thoughts? Bring them in. Bring it in, guys. Where does this feel relevant for you guys? Or I'm going to flip into a little bit of like a nature lesson, but like, if I just want to create this space, if anybody has any thoughts on this. What? Do I need to call on somebody? Gary just told me to call on somebody. Okay, Marcella, awesome.
See how our microphone's open up?
What we actually did yesterday?
Hello, it's actually Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Yeah, hi. So yeah,
Anna.
I definitely agree with everything you're saying, and thinking of all the times of, being that way and projecting and all of that. And wow, they're such great teachers. And yeah, this is really helpful. Just like being able to like take another step further back than where I was already seeing to implement more of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're eating dinner, so I took it off the video.
No, that's okay. That's totally okay. No, thank you for chiming in. Marguerite, anything to?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I was also eating dinner, which is why I put my video off, but now I'm done. It's interesting, this whole idea of like removing the guilt, and how, yes, of course, we must remove the guilt. And even my mother used to say, guilt is a wasted emotion. And she wasn't one to make us feel guilty about things. She really wasn't, even though I know she felt tremendous guilt in her lives. And all of us, all 4 of her kids, ended up having weird guilt in various ways. Like, you just wonder, it's like, where does that even come from, right? It comes from everywhere. But the whole remove the guilt, I think the question is how?
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. And honestly, that to me, because I'm sure I've said this before to you guys, but the 2 questions that, your kids are not going to be receiving or encouraged from me to ask, not that I would correct them or prevent them from asking them, but just from sitting with people for so many years, I find the 2 least helpful questions are how and why. And that like, it's like what, when, where, like you can pretty much hang in those spaces. But that's where it's so much about being in the present moment, that like awareness is important, but I'm talking about awareness of like internally directed awareness of all the bad in the world. Well, if I'm somebody who is harming myself unknowingly, there's a really important awareness point where learning about some of the harms that exist in my environment, or how they're potentially harmful. And I shouldn't say that, learning about the harms and then running it through my own intuition, because there's lots of, on all sides, there's all kinds of propaganda about the harms, right? And sometimes I become all too aware of harms, and then my entire life is just, I am sensitive and I am subject to all of the forces at work around me. And I've lived that experience, and it was not helpful at all. And that is part of what I feel that especially this last 2 years, I've been transcending, because awareness can be great. But as your kids are learning, as we are learning, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through the whole thing, but I would really, if you guys are interested, like, let me know, because I have had so much fun exploring the astro or celestial bodies of like sun, moon, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, and Mercury and Mars with your kids. But I'm teaching them for a very important reason, and not because I'm somebody who was myself well versed in it. In fact, when I learned about astronomy and kind of like space in general as a kid, like I was super freaked out and I just wanted to avoid it. Movies about space, like everything about space was just like, yikes, that freaks me out. Don't. I wasn't like a sign me up to be an astronaut kind of kid. But I've really been brought in. I've heard people, like, I've kind of wanted to be in the club with all the people who are like, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde, and, you know, who are so aware of the astrological forces at work. But I was a super skeptic, so I didn't really necessarily believe in it. But my journey led me to learn about these things. And because I'm learning in this very elemental, essence-based way, you know, this idea of sun, especially. So Griffin is in this, my oldest son is in this class called Transitional History. So he's doing like the entire, from creation all the way to modern day, reading through this textbook and the Bible. And I've read, you know, a lot of the Old Testament, but like, it's interesting to read it alongside a history book. And, you know, he was learning about Egypt, and, you know, in Egypt, they worship Ra, the sun god. But, you know, when we're too much about awareness, daylight, shedding light on everything, you like bleach, cleanse life out. You know, you don't honor what's in the contrast and the shadows. So awareness sometimes can actually be, you can almost go too far by the way of light, you know, everybody who's love and light, and, you know, all about spiritual awakening. So for me, the how is in the what am I experiencing? What am I experiencing right now? What are the beliefs that I'm seeing in this guilt experience? And what do I choose to believe? What aligns for me? Does that feel on brand? Like if you were a brand, right? And like you have this is how I want to show up. This is how I want my life to feel. I'm a creator. I choose to create in my life. Is this thing that I believe? Like, do I need to beat myself up because I misspelled something in my presentation that I showed everybody? And I am an educator, and how could I possibly have made a mistake like that and just not, and glazed over it, not noticed? And everybody probably thinks that I'm completely ill-equipped to teach their kids. Like, that was literally what was going on. And it was not even just the thought. It was like emotionally, like, I mean, like I felt it in my solar plexus. Like, it was just, what? Like, no, like I have so many amazing things to do through my day. It was a typo. I like throw the slides together and it's this beautiful stream of consciousness, and it's probably, you know, spell check. I don't even need to justify it, right? But I don't choose to keep that, you know, and that's kind of like a low stakes one, but like just as an example. So the how is just, no thanks. Let's X that one out of the list. And then I'm going to choose to replace it with this one. And if and when it comes up again, okay, I got another round. And usually there's less emotional magnetism. There's less juice that keeps it with you. One of the things we talked about this week with the children is that emotions are the magnetism in this electromagnetic universe, this electromagnetic field. And I was going to ask you, actually, before I go into that, let me switch in to our like a little bit of nature discussion. So who would like to raise their hand or unmute and tell me a definition, your definition of universe? What is the universe? Gary's telling me to call on somebody, so, you know, that's the alternative. Come on. So I have to cheat and have Lauren define it? What's the universe to you? I'm curious. What is the universe?
Creative potential.
Love it. Awesome. Creative potential, of course. Shido's mom, Vanessa, I love the brilliant definition. Shido has we write down all of his definitions. Creative potential, beautiful. Okay, what else? Come on.
I would like to chime in.
Okay. Go ahead, Angel. Yeah.
Something that has worked for me is like when you catch yourself saying like, I made a mistake. How could I do that? I should be an educator. You could think the opposite of that thought and like repeat that to yourself and then think of what evidence in your own life supports that truth.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. Right. Totally. Yeah. And actually that works this. So from a universal perspective or a syntropic perspective, if we look to nature, how do you neutralize something? Well, you take the charge, you give it the opposite charge, and then now we create neutral. If it's positive, you give it a negative, right? If we've been around screens too much, we go put our feet in the earth or breathe in some salt air by the ocean, and now we feel like neutralized energy. So absolutely, I love that, Angel. So you can do the opposite. And the same goes when we do the mindfold with the kids, when we talk about like a mantra or affirmation, and if they have like negative self-talk, like we go, okay, we'll create the opposite phrase and then repeat that over and over. That's another yeah, so there's a how for you, Marguerite. You can count on Angel. So if you need a how, I might be like, I don't like how or why. How just comes to you, but Angel.
Thank you, Angel.
Okay, so universe. So even if we just break down the word, okay, Marguerite, why don't you tell us your beautiful definition of universe? Because she did the etymology of it.
Right. So we did it in the first block when we were doing stuff with geometry. And so the word uni means, or una, that prefix means one. And verse actually comes from turn. So one turn, one complete turn. But if you do one turn around a point, you come up with a circle. And the circle, of course, is the all-encompassing shape from which, all shapes, in which all shapes are contained, in which the whole is, it is the whole in which everything else is contained. And it is the energy source of all creation kind of thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So this one turn, right? Or even if you wanted to even think of verse like a poem or in a script, right? So, but if we really like for our purposes at Soul to Soil, to keep it really simple for the kids, we defined it this year as all that is. Is like being. Is like being, right? We're here, we're alive, we are, right? Like we were just a thought, in our parents' minds perhaps, and then all of a sudden here we are, right? So all that is, right? So when we're talking about the universe, we're really talking about the whole. And when we talk about love, the energy of love, we're not necessarily talking about romantic love or familial love, right? We're talking about I think it's agape is the Greek one that's like unconditional, right? So like without conditions, without specific angles in consideration, perhaps, that like there's just this whole, and then there are these parts of it. So how about ether? Can anyone define ether for me? What is ether? Sam, you want to give like the old school, like surgical definition of ether? I think that's the only way that we've related to ether in our society before, right? But unless you've been on this spiritual path for a while, but I had no connection to the word ether other than like ethereal. Marcella, you want to give it a shot, or Justin?
I would say ether is the ambient energy or prana that is the non-physical between all physical objects. It's the life source, it's God, it's the fabric that literally is the oneness in what you're just describing, that gives all vitality to all things, and dependent on the quality of the container that's containing that ether will determine its state of health and well-being.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah. So it's very much like this energetic thing that we don't necessarily sense. We don't see it. We don't smell it. We don't, right. The senses that we're used to, besides like the more transcendent senses, like the 5 sense experience, we're not sensing ether within those. But For the kids, what was helpful for me in teaching this was this idea of space, not outer space, like, you know, NASA stuff, like space as in, and it's really beautiful, Justin, how you mentioned container, because it's so true that the nature of what holds this etheric energy, this ethereal, like unseen, but forceful, but like vital energy is really determines what manifests. So like the etheric body in, you know, kind of a biological sense, in you know, certainly not our traditional biology, because much like physics, you know, you've got entropic biology, and then you've got like actual, let's talk about, you know, ethereal biology. There are different bodies, right? So the etheric body, it's kind of like this design frame that the physical will then take form into, as Justin said. But quite simply, just picture it as space. Picture it as a space of, and for me, it's darkness. It's void. It's like the absence of the 5 elements, or the 4 elements actually, that most of us relate with: the air, earth, fire, and water, right? It's the 5th element. It's that element that isn't necessarily sensible in the way that we're conventionally used to, but is the space, it's the stuff, it's the fabric, as Justin said, of creation. So we create within the ether all the time. Like you're creating in the ether right now. Each time you absolve yourself of a guilt, either by, you know, trying a trick that Angel gave of like trying the opposite and looking for evidence of the opposite in your life, so you have some proof, you know, that it's not true. You can help yourself neutralize any of the charge that has you believing that guilt that doesn't align for you. Or if you just go, no thanks anymore, because I don't care whether that's true. That's not what I choose. I'm a creator. I get to choose. And this is what I like to believe instead. Then you're creating in the ether. You're creating in the darkness. So I really like this particular year, because I've taught ether. This is my 3rd time now. And each time as I explore and I ask nature and I sit with these concepts, these really beautiful awarenesses come to me. But, you know, if you imagine like ether, where do we see this? Because we do actually witness ethereal examples in our lives. When you've been in a theater before, right before a live performance, right before the orchestra starts to play, the theater is dark, right? There's this darkness, there's this quiet, there's this nothingness. And in that nothingness, nothing is not nothing. Nothing is everything. That's where all of a sudden these sound vibrations are going to start, and like your cells are just going to start to sing and resonate with them. You feel this form, this taking shape, and then you start to see it, and the lights come in, and then the actual characters in these forms start interacting before you. So it's this, you know, the theater is such a beautiful example of this darkness, this void, this nothingness, you know, even vacuum that becomes something. You know, if you think about the womb, you know, a lot of that is this like almost like etheric, this ethereal space. It's like, you know, the child hasn't really come into being yet. In some ways, you know, he or she has, but like it's this dark space where so much creative potential, like Vanessa said, to loop in her definition, creative potential is born and is created from this fabric. And we're so used to physical, you know, fabric, right? Or you know, the fabric of life that we are, you know, aware of, because we have been taught by these only physically oriented sciences. And, you know, it's just so interesting, because the ether is so important and it's so present for us. The subconscious mind sleep state is where so much of this etheric, you know, ethereal, you know, creation happens. So we learned celestial versus ethereal with the older kids, right? Because in many ways, celestial, there's many different definitions, and some definitions will say that it is ethereal, but in general, celestial is of the sky. So it's kind of like of the visible sky, but ethereal is of the space. It's of the space where light comes through, that light arises out of this darkness. So darkness and light aren't necessarily these opposing forces where one is better than the other. Oh, that one's dark, that one's occult, that one is, you know, this idea of, you know, the people of the night, or people who worship the night, or who are, you know, they've been made bad, right? Made evil. And there's been kind of, you know, a lot of guilt around this idea of darkness. And what is so prevalent for our children, but a fear of darkness. Like how many of you guys have kids who have never even gone through a phase where they were afraid of the dark? If you understand neuroscience, like our brain is literally hardwired, to fear the dark. And I don't know, that hardwiring happens, neurons that fire together, wire together, this programming that happens, it's not, I don't think we're not born afraid of the dark. The baby's pretty freaked out by the light when they come into it, right? But yeah, we like have this relationship with dark. So my goal was to really help to neutralize the weight and the ghosts that are with our children in this relationship with darkness and fear, so they can see it's a creative space. Marcella, would love to hear from you.
So I think another way to really grasp what ether is I think of the breath. And then if we break down in Latin, like inspire, like inspire is within spirit. And like we also, we inspire others. So that's like the spirit within them getting ignited, but we breathe into it, right? We also re-spirit, we respirate. And then whenever the spirit passes on, it expires. And so I feel like they're really synonymous in my perspective of spirit and the ether. So it's like the spiritual energy that is the prana, that is the life force. And essentially that everything that exists is all sharing it. Like we're all breathing it, we're all eating it, we're all living it, we're all thinking from it, that's, I really truly feel is the oneness, is the ether. And I mean, I should say it's another it's another like facet of the oneness or of God is the ether. I don't know. I just wanted to share that because
I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. No, and when we get into air, that we talk a lot about that spirare in Italian or in Latin, right? Is that spirit, and what is this Holy Spirit? I remember I grew up Catholic, and my grandmother, we would say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I was like, what is the Holy Spirit? And nobody really defined that for me. But I asked nature, and like it just feels like the answers are right there in front of us when we look to nature. So that is another beautiful definition. But when we think of ether, like the way that I would love to relate with it is this fifth element that doesn't necessarily, it's separate a little bit from fire, air, water, and earth, right? It's void. In many ways, it's vacuum, right? So it's like the absence of air. The kids are going to learn that word. And then we're also going to talk about spells, because, words are actually those are building blocks for how we create in the ether. Like Marguerite, one of the things I was thinking about with what you were saying with the guilt is like, listen to your words, right? And I know you know this, right? Listen to your words and like make sure we know their meaning. The English language is so confusing with this. And I'm definitely going to ask Marguerite and Lauren to like chime in when we start to really talk about natural law, because a lot of us are fooled because and Diana and I were talking about this too, Diana, who teaches Spanish, that like in other languages, it's much clearer. There are really specific words that have very specific meaning. And in English, we have these homonyms. Weren't you just teaching homonyms, Marguerite? And it's very confusing. Like, why is the same spelling, for the same word for two different meanings? And we're really confused by this, but words create in the ether why do we call it spelling? Have you guys ever like made that connection between like spells, like magical spells, and spelling? Like words are very, very powerful. They hold vibration, they hold meaning. We have a collective consciousness, that consensus reality that I referred to in that chapter. This is how we end up in these conflicts. And what did she say? She said ignorance is a major part of it. And most of us are not ignorant because we choose to be. It's just because so much of what is input into our minds at a young age has absolutely no, mechanism of evidentiary support. Like if you're told that you're guilty of something, but you can't sense that, and you have to go, shoot, I can really get in trouble when I didn't even know there was anything I was doing. Man, I can't trust myself for my actions. I better like, I don't know, I better create this other like persona because these guys have some rules and I don't really know what they are or have any like internal attunement to them. So I better like create this this personality that won't get me in trouble. And, you know, that's like, that is literally the reason I created Soul to Soil, so that we, that our children have at least that initial imprinting and programming, so that they can express authentically and know when you mess up or when you really, you know, harm or get caught up into some kind of a conflict that's actual, that maybe there is some remorse or you know, a making of amends, making remedy, like we, you know, we'll talk about in natural law too, that when that's called for, we can trust our experience. That's the whole point of living experience, is to experience ourselves in our environment and to let it be okay, and be able to make up for it, to be able to make someone whole again. Even our court system talks about that. When you're making remedy, the goal is to make the other party whole again. Here's universe again, right? Here's wholeness. Go ahead, Justin.
So I wanted to share it when you're talking about spells, because yeah, this is something that I'm aware of, and even using that word to describe how to make another word. So I usually call it lettering. Like if I need someone for them to letter their name, I say, "Oh, can you letter your name for me?" instead of spell your name. And then
As like
also
an
teaching, teaching Ayana, like, let's build words instead of spell words. And how spells are. Oh, that was the other thing. So I just recently got Invisalign like a few days ago, and I feel sorry for anyone who's ever had braces, because I heard it's nothing compared to braces, but it's a real thing. So I was feeling it, and the homeopathic remedies, you know, they're all Latin. Their origins, if you say them out, they are incantations of the frequency of those plants and whatever those remedies are. So you can say, and I do this often, is you can say it. You can't just say like Arnica, Montana. You have to like feel like you have an experience when you evoke these words, and you let it flow through you. And the more fine-tuned you flow it through yourself to let it echo, the more resonant it is with the vibration. So I was just thinking in my mind and also saying Arnica, Montana. Mm-hmm. And it instantly my pain would go away. And I was like 3C, 6C, 200C, and I was just kind of playing with it. But that's something I've done. I do a lot in like energy work or whatever it is. Or if you need like a little more like reassurances, you can put your finger on something and then also do it there, like almost like your finger is like a wand, since we're talking about spells. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I wanted to share that because you know, we have the tablets, the little the little sugar tablets, and they're very helpful, but just to empower everyone and let them know, like talking about creativity and a God force and everything, like it's awesome. So I invite everyone to play around with it so you get comfortable, and like you won't even need the pellets anymore. So just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, you got an extra connection to homeopathy. You know, I always love that. But yeah, so tell me, so just guys, just weigh in. Tell me, like, is everybody following so far? Like
Justin is
Justin is so beautifully, and Marcella. But no, so this idea of conflict and the words that are being spoken, right? And the controversy. Controversy is like a version of conflict that is entangled, you know, like almost like a necklace, right? Like a knot that you know, you kind of, there's no way to rush taking a knot out of a necklace. Like, have you guys ever done that? It's like one of the, I'm always like on speed. So I feel like I live life fast. So it was always so painstaking for me to sit there and like one by one see each entanglement and pull it apart. You cannot do that rushed. Like, it's just, unless, you know, we really have tuned up these magic wands, you know, it's just not, you know, like you got to slow down. So that's what I feel like. A conflict can be an entanglement when it's steeped in controversy, and we don't need to rush to find the story, but it's really important to find what is our angle, what are we relating with, and so on the topic of angle, one of the things that really occurred to me, I saw this really beautiful description of our universe and angles of light, right? So Marguerite talked about how the circle is what holds all of the shapes, all of the creative shapes and in our dimensional reality, and not like just a plain, like flat circle, right? Obviously we live in these other, dimensions. We're not just flat, but this like circular shape holds all of these other beautiful shapes that create. And I don't know how many of you guys have seen, and I'm going to totally mess up the name, so I'll just give a very crude definition of this, but like, have you ever seen, a vibrational frequency on a certain, like a table, usually some kind of a metal or some kind of a good conductor with like salt on it, and how that tone will just literally vibrate all of the salt, and it'll just fall and settle into this incredible sacred geometrical shape, like the most complex, incredible shape. Or there's this Instagram account I used to follow. I can't remember the name of it, but this guy used to do all of these like somatic like shape drawings and would put them up against like a lion's face or like a human face, and you can see how actually these shapes are kind of like the etheric construct of our physical form. It's really, really cool how we are just this how we come from these shapes. But this idea of circle and wholeness, one of the ways that I kind of loop this in to be relevant, because I don't go into too much detail with that with the kids, other than like showing them the cool pictures sometimes. I was talking about, like, if you're walking around a circle and you're staring at the center, right, whatever you're seeing, or you're staring through the center, as long as you're aware of the central point, that there is this wholeness, right, that we all come from whatever this original source point is, that when you're aware of that, you can see all different angles. All of us can have a different angle of this universe based on the accumulated life lived, and then, experience even that we were brought in, that we incarnated with, right? So we have our own angle. So no one, even Jill Turlin said it, no one can possibly know your meaning. Your kids are going to get into a fight and they're going to go, you did it on purpose. And we talk about this. And it's taken a long, long time to loosen up that one, I'll tell you, but it's okay, because we have space and time to disentangle the necklace. But you did it on purpose. How can you possibly know the meaning of someone else's intention? You cannot possibly. Did you ask? And that is our solution. Did you ask? Did you intend? What was your intention there? I'm curious about your intention. And then the other angle, this other completely distinctly different angle of the whole, then shares their side of things. Where I feel like we run into trouble is so many of us in an entropic view are facing away from center. We forget that we're all connected. So what's so interesting is if you look at the word angle, and then I'm going to bring your name into it, angel, right? You look at the word angel, right? You're just switching two letters and you got the same exact word. So angle and angel, like an angle of light, an angel is just this angle of light that can show you where yours is perhaps either missing something. And again, there can be angels in kind of a darker space, an unknown, that are driven by whatever energy you're magnetizing. So if I've got lots of guilt or shame or fear and I'm turning away and I forget that I'm connected to this whole universe, that no matter what bad happens to me, this is what Syntropy tells us. It's all bringing us back to the whole. It's all bringing us back to love. Everything performs a function with purpose, no matter what you do, how far off path you are, how terrible the things that you've done are, or that someone did to you. All of it is serving a purpose. There is nothing that is without purpose. And that purpose is love. And I'm sorry, nothing that is not performing a function with purpose. Everything has function. There's no such thing as waste. But if I'm facing away from that, I don't even remember that center point, that connection point, the nodal point that connects every single one of us, then the angels that I see out there might actually lead me further out there, or lead me, they might be distorted. They might not actually balance out my point of view. So, in many respects, the teachers, when we do these peace talks, we're just meant to be an angel. Like, here we have one kid's angle and another kid's angle, or like several kids, and we're just here to be an angel. We're here to hold this broadened space, this lens, and this angel of syntropy, of a syntropic way of remembering that we are all here to see another angle, to have ours, to express ours, and to come to some kind of harmonic resolution when we're ready. And sometimes the goal is just to release the emotions. You know, Sawyer and Nico, I think Shannon had to hop off. We're in a fight the other day, and Sawyer, you know, he's just turned 5. He is, you know, he was so upset still. He wasn't even able to release his emotion, but he wanted to have a peace talk because, you know, it's wonderful now. They request peace talk. No, I want to have a peace talk right now. But he just wasn't ready. He needed to release some emotion. Like if that magnetism is so alive, and when we're talking about ether and space, you know, one of the cool ways that I helped the kids understand like what's in this space is that most of the substrate of this space that a lot of transfer of energy happens in is an electromagnetic field. So how do I call you on my cell phone and it can, no matter where you are in the world, I can get you? Where is that sound traveling? Those are not radio waves, you know, that's not light. Those are not typical sound waves. It's not traveling through the medium of air, right? Sound requires air as a medium. You know, light has its own way, right? It needs a medium for travel, or although actually ether that can, no, in the vacuum, actually light wouldn't travel that way. No, but, oh no, it would travel that way. Excuse me, but let's not talk, but the Wi-Fi, okay? Let's talk about Wi-Fi, right? Our phones, it's traveling through ether. Electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetism is the magnetism of emotion. That's the driving force, the pull that then will attract certain charges, and our thoughts or our beliefs are charges. So if I'm feeling lots of emotion, I'm like, it doesn't make sense for me to force a resolution in that moment. It's better for me to tend to the feeling. If I'm feeling immense amounts of guilt, and guilt is kind of like an electromagnetic entanglement because there's lots of thoughts and feelings that go into making something that's a guilt, right? Not just like anger, right? Anger is a specific vibration of emotion. And it's traveling and it's pulling, it's attracting the experience that maybe you don't want. So while it's there, it's so important to tend to that first. And then we go to deal with the charges, and then we can neutralize the charges. But when we're flared up, it's like, it's almost impossible to manage those feelings. So this is where, you know, nature really shows us how when we see the forces at play, we allow them to express, we slow down. We sense into them and then allow them to move, because emotions, it's energy in motion. If we keep it and we hold it and we wear it or suppress it, there are downstream physical consequences. Justin is an incredible craniosacral therapist. I wouldn't even just call you a craniosacral therapist. He's an amazing, you know, body, mind, spirit worker who works in this space. Like, you know, you have a downstream physical consequence. Usually it's going to find a root in some kind of a spiritual, emotional, you know, etheric experience. And when you disentangle that, now we're really talking about healing. You can tinker on the physical all you want, but like we're talking about source, right? The fabric of what creates these conflicts. So, you know, in the specific of like the here and now of, you know, a scenario that's relevant to you guys, we're talking on this very like, you know, general nature-based, you know, spiritual level, but it matters, you know, in matter, in whatever is material for you right now. So if you have some kind of conflict materializing, I would love to hear about it. I would love to hear about it. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up that they haven't been able to bring into resolution, or just even something confusing about what I just said? Because I really tackled a lot there. Do I have to call on you, Gary?
I got no conflict.
You have no conflict. Okay. Anybody have a conflict? Something to bring up as an example?
I have something, but it might be backtracking a little bit.
That's good. That's okay. It's great.
Sorry, I keep hitting different buttons and it's not going where I want to go. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, we can.
So something that you said, I think it was even in the first talk that we had, but it was about how you see people spraying the rocks and the coral and all of that, trying to get rid of, you know, the quote unquote bad stuff. But in essence, you're creating a different environment for the stuff that originally should have been there in the first place, making that less abundant, creating even a different environment for other things to come in. And just looking at that through the lens of Syntropy, trying to apply that to basic everyday stuff like ants and roaches in my house.
Mhm.
Because so there's, as a chiropractor, looking always for those like natural, holistic ways to do things. The lens of Syntropy to me took it an entirely new level of, we're not looking for, like, I'll just use this because it's a common example, but your kid is sick, right? You don't want to give them Tylenol. What's a natural thing to give them? But in essence, you're still kind of doing the same thing. Or, someone has, let's say, pink eye and they don't want to give them an antibiotic. They give them like colloidal silver, but it's technically still killing the bacteria or the virus that's there, or garlic or whatever. It's quote unquote natural and holistic, but you're still taking that same perspective of killing something that's there. Whether it's
Natural
the same
or right.
Yeah.
Or synthetic poisonous. Yeah.
So thinking of that, because we have all these like tiny ants that I'm currently trying to clean out of the honey jar, and looking at different ways to get rid of them. You talk about finding like the source of origin, like why are they there in the first place? Well, yeah, ants and honey, like I get it, but I'm not gonna just not have honey in my house. So what's my other option, right?
Right.
And I know this just sounds super silly, but
No, it doesn't. And you're not the first in our community to ask me this question. So I'm happy to be able to have this forum. I'm pretty sure you asked this.
The taro ant bait killers versus spreading diatomaceous earth versus like how I'm having a hard time trying to do it in Syntropy.
Right. So remember, Syntropy is not perfectionism. Okay. And this I needed to really clarify for myself. Because when I switched into natural health from kind of like a conventional way of relating, all of these bad things were there. Waste, right, is a big one, right? We want like zero waste is like a whole like way of life. And beautiful conceptually, but very difficult to do in our world. And then this idea of like no pesticides, no toxins, no killing. Is the assumption. But if you remember, we're talking about nature's perspective. Okay. So nature has self-regulation systems. And the trouble and kind of like my life's work is helping to harmonize this idea of living naturally in an unnatural world. But truthfully, we live in a world that has been unnatural for actually a very long time, longer than just this industrialized society, I believe. Like we're talking like ancient civilizations, even there have been unnatural ways of living. And that where you don't really find, you're not going to find like yourself overrun with ants and like a really balanced forest system. You're really not even going to find roaches. I literally asked one of my coaches, I have this friend in Bali who I was like really curious about Syntropy. He's who I learned Syntropy from, and I asked him this exact question because we went to this mountain house in North Carolina one year, and there were just roaches all over the place. Like we had to like go into a different house, and I thought, this was my nature vacation. We're in the middle of a forest. How is this possible? But yeah, unfortunately, humans live in high density scenarios, right? And the way that we have built our civilizations and our neighborhoods, we do end up with these lots of cleaner uppers. Okay. So bugs are decomposers. They're like waste collectors. They're like nature's garbage collecting and breakdown system. Same with, bacteria and fungi and things like that. Right. And there is a symbiosis to most of them. Insects are not always like the most pleasant. So this is where you get to use your internal alignment, because think about how much guilt is there if you're like, you know what, the tarot just works. And I mean, is it really that bad? I'm just killing these guys and it's not, getting anywhere. It's not like off gassing all over the place. And, we could say, well, it's going into the garbage system, or if you wash it down your drain, it's going into the water supply. Have you guys checked like what's in the water supply and like what's all around us at all times? I don't feel like we're here to learn this stuff about nature to be crusaders for absolute purity. Let's just whitewash, bleach, cleanse everything of synthetics and make everything as natural as possible. Sometimes we do that and we make mistakes. Look at the whole, kind of climate change movement and like switching into hybrid vehicles and battery powered cars. If you were to use everything from nature, that's incredibly extractive of the earth too. One of the really beautiful, one of the remedies for this specific guilt consciousness is Staphysagria. And if you take it in like a mega potency, what the themes are so incredibly beautiful. But Jill Turlin tells this story of how, depending on the time in history you were living, if you ate something made with sugarcane, because that was such a cash crop in like the slave trade, there were so much emotionally entangled in sugar production that when processed sugar came around, when machines were doing it instead of like, disempowered, abused humans, it actually was much healthier. Human systems tolerated it way better than when it was like fresh from the farm, with all of the desperation and sadness that went into that horrific, time in history. Same thing with cotton, that actually synthetic fabrics were so much healthier. It was like actually you could, I think people were just, nobody was reacting to the synthetic fabrics back then when switching from this, cotton fabrics that were harvested in this emotional weight. Like, when have we ever learned that perspective, right? So the idea is that as Syntropy strives for a balance point, but like a harmonic balance point. It's not meant to swing you from one way to the other. One of the things that really is going to be coming into conversation for me professionally on like the homeopath side of things, like I'm not, I work as a homeopath, but my goal is not to just clinically help people remove their pain. Like you said, trade Tylenol for, belladonna or something. It's not, that's very much like it's like the eat this, not that guy, like I'm not here to just swap things. That's a really great introduction into homeopathy, but there's no shift in consciousness. So the goal, Addison, is for you to be with your relationship with it. How do you feel about like, look, these ants are in my territory. I tried caulking the holes where I think they're coming from, which is a really great thing to do, right? Maybe I tried, one of the best ways to do it is to build soil around your house to make sure you have soil. The Wormy Queen, who's really beautiful human who has this really awesome perspective, and she's so knowledgeable about earthworms and composting and things like that. She'll say that like one of the best ways to get rid of ants is to make sure you have soil around your house, because in a healthy soil system, you're not going to find a lot of ants. There don't have to be those shredders because you've got mites and you've got I'm forgetting all my soil sponge members, but you have the arthropods who shred things up that don't necessarily have to be like, colonies of ants. Ants actually look at the way their civilizations run. It's very like a Roman Empire-ish, it's like they're very concentrated in high density, but they're cleaning up dead and, dysfunctional stuff. One of the most beautiful teachings I've ever, it was just such a gift to us, was the first year we had one of those butterfly chrysalis nets, and we were watching these caterpillars, and they were munching away, and then we had 3 caterpillars, 2 created a chrysalis and looked really healthy, and the other was just like struggling. It just was like really behind the other ones, and I remember seeing it one day, and it was just kind of gyrating, and it just looked like it kept going up as though it was getting into the shape, and then it was like the next day it would just be down. And then one day I woke up in the morning and I saw it, and it was still alive, but it was covered in fire ants. And they had literally like eaten through the netting and were all over this thing. And I like right away looked at the healthy chrysalises, and they were fine. And I was like, oh no, I better take this guy out, because they're gonna go attack next, because I'm in that attack war. Like, these are bad guys, and the bad guys are just trying to like clean house, right? But I took the dying caterpillar out of there and put it like, next to the grass. And it was so interesting. Within like an hour or two, the netting was clear of ants. There was not an ant to be found, and both healthy chrysalis were still intact. And these ants were just decomposing this poor, dying, struggling creature. So this is what we're talking about with the ether. We don't know what the story is, but you get to choose it. So I would just say, what do you feel good about doing? You don't have to. Being in alignment and in integrity with syntropy and nature doesn't mean you don't kill, okay? Who looks at nature and doesn't see killing? Come on. but again, if it doesn't feel good in your cells, there's something there, bring it up. Let's see what guilts are there, right? And I'm not saying that, killing, without getting into that's a whole other conversation, right? But how many people are crusaders for like no killing, but like, even plant-based, you're killing something, right? So these ideas are just guilt-based, right? That this is why I like to look to nature, because it doesn't make things bad. It just things sit in an organized, like an order. And so it's I've done that before, where I've just like let ants hang out. It still happened, or I was putting borax in jelly, or I've done all of that stuff. And sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. Diatomaceous earth like everywhere, just like powder all over my house. I've done that before. And but again, it's not wrong, right, to do what feels in line with like technology has purpose. I really honestly think if we're not here to like go backwards and restore everything that was just us frolicking naked in a forest, eating fruit off trees. Like that is a beautiful idea, right? No shame, no guilt, but that's not necessarily the goal of this. We're not here to like be super self-righteous about this, or syntropically righteous about how we're living. It's just, I would just let it go. And like, if tarot works for you, just like, we've done it before where we're like, man, it's been raining a lot and it's just all over the place. And I've tried. And all right, so here we're putting down the little localized baits. It's not a big deal. That's my feeling. Now, what you could also do is just put that out into the ether, and like some miraculous neighbor or friend is going to come to you and be like, oh my gosh, this works so incredibly well. You got to try this. And they're going to give you something. There are actually homeopathic remedies. I just haven't tried them for like roaches and things like that. In the homeopathic approach to what's called agrohomeopathy is you basically create a remedy out of the thing's predator. So that seems to work the best. Like coccinella or the lady beetle would help with like aphids or something like that. So it's hard with ants because they kind of have some sovereignty in their space. But yeah, so and there actually is a remedy of potentized ant. I haven't used homeopathy for pest resolution, but even look at the energy that we're taught. Like you see those trucks around, it's pest control. Control is of entropy. That is not necessarily resolution. So like caulking mechanically, adjusting your environment is really the best bet, like fortifying your home, because nature is going to come in. Did you ever see that like Life After Humans documentary? Like it shows you how these like incredibly brilliant plants will just like completely engulf like a skyscraper, and break it down, because nature is anything that's defunct, it's not functioning anymore, it's dead, it doesn't have life to it, it's not co-creating with the rest, is going to be decomposing. So our houses are not exactly built in the most like ecological way. That's why there are people with like eco homes, and they're designing them with like all this bioresonance, where just walking into your home heals you, or there's breathable, they're made with hemp. Like this is not my expertise, but eventually that is just by shifting our perspective on how we approach ourselves when we scream at our kids and have other, some ghosts haunting us. That's to me how you align with Syntropy, even better than using the most perfectly natural, no chemicals, never, ever, ever. Don't even say the word toxin around me. Like that, I've done that. I literally lived that. I asked my husband for many years, and I was really very sick still. I was really very frustrated still. So yeah, sorry, I know that was a long answer. Did that help, Addison?
No, it did. Thank you. And I know that was like a silly example, but just
not at all.
The process of working through it in a syntropic lens, you're able to apply it to other things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, beautiful. No, thank you for bringing it up, because it's a really important point. And that's, my goal is never to make something bad before you're ready. Like I was really like this about waste, like really beating myself up over like, oh my God, how am I ever going to live this life of zero waste? And there was just more guilt. If there's guilt, it's not syntropic. The guilt is not of syntropy. It's of entropy. So we live in this world, we do the best we can, but it happens in an evolved stage. It happens in this slow disentangling of a necklace. We don't just all of a sudden flip into perfection and then, cancel out every single, dissonant energy around us, or toxin, or, foods and stuff. We come into our own harmony by walking the path and then seeing what feels good, and what if something feels like too much or too overwhelming, you can really miss out. It can be a distraction to try to clean up every single thing that you're doing. You can really be distracted from what you're actually dealing with when you approach the path that way, in my experience and in my opinion. And I've really come into balance with that, from the like non-toxic living and like just being so anti everything that's anti life, but yeah, but there are alternatives to colloidal silver. I don't use biocides. I really don't. I don't use it on wounds. I don't need to. I've discovered the herbs and homeopathic remedies that help. But in the meantime, if I hadn't, like, I used it a ton, colloidal silver, but yeah, it ended up showing me that it wasn't the resolver that, argentum nitrochrome or pulsatilla, or, a little bit of patience with the conjunctivitis that's not necessarily as disgusting and contagion based. Like the physical contagion theory, it doesn't hold up in nature. It just doesn't. It doesn't even in our own experience, and that is totally my topic that I love to go down. But like, it seems like the true story. But like I said, there's contagion just in the ether, in the energy. Eating sugarcane from like, or just even think about like, domesticated animals who are, abused and in really terrible industrialized farms. Like that energy is there, right? Like we're energetic beings. So many things can influence us, but our greatest influence is seeing specifically what resonates. I'm not going to clear everyone's guilt that, or somebody on Instagram is like, this is the guilt of the moment, and then I'm going to really focus on that. No, your story will lead you to exactly what you're doing. So with these ants, you can see, oh, wow, I can see I struggle. I'm really trying to do this the right way, but like, I really don't want them here. Get out, please. See where you are in your life. If it's not your time to like go and research or try out every single natural, pest resolution remedy, then just, you get the stuff from Home Depot.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, you guys, sorry I went long. Any other things that I can tend to or receive or hold space for? Nope. Okay, awesome. Oh, I love that, Vanessa. I really love to thank the medicine that is being carried by the animal or creature. Ants bring patience and perseverance and are basically helping us clean. It's true. They're cleaner uppers. Yeah, they're cleaner uppers. They can be a little annoying. But no, I love that. And again, that's a beautiful perspective, right? But it doesn't have to it doesn't tell you that you can't do something. So it's just a really beautiful way to process, and processing is so important. Even that gets a bad rap, right? Processed food. I was like a villain for such a long time, but processing makes things so beautiful. When it's done with this, beautiful intention, and when you have influence over the what and the, whatever you're creating in your life. So your set of beliefs, you get to choose. You are a unique angle of light, and you get to choose. You are an angel. You get to create in this life, and we can find inspiration everywhere, but you just don't want to tether yourself to anything that comes directly from an outside source that you can't sense into. So this relationship with ether, this relationship with void and darkness is so important, because as we acquaint ourselves with these ghosts, these emotions, and we start to clear them and let them move, we even literally, you dance them out, you punch your bed, your bed will be able to handle it. We do Qigong in the mornings at Soul to Soil, and I always say, give it to Mother Earth. She will alchemize it. She will process it. That's where all the decomposers in the soil, they're gonna process things so that they become these elemental pieces again that can then be built into something more beautiful. Everything can be broken down and processed. I don't think Mother Nature is really worried about us. I think we're the ones who just are so off track. We're just totally off center. We're not aware of the fact that we're all connected. So we're just being bombarded with the Fahrenheit 451. Anyone read that book back in school? Fahrenheit 451, that was this firefighter who was assigned to burn books, and his wife was at home, this character who was at home with a wall full of screens, and she was just constantly watching the screens. And it's very what's that movie? Hunger Games. it's just, we're so manipulated by media stories and talking heads and just more controversy. Oh, you guys are starting to awaken to your own power for get this big war that I'm going to throw in your face, or this big, energetic, cell tower apocalypse that I'm going to throw at you. Like, you just don't want to get too caught up in the drama and just stay centered that you are the creator in your life. Oh, I love this. So Marguerite says there's a book called Feeding Your Demons. Oh, I love it. Can you share that on the WhatsApp group, Marguerite? I love that. Feeding Your Demons. Yeah, because that's the thing. These charges, these thought forms, they actually feed the magnetism, that energy.
Yeah, I will. I can't remember the author's name. I've gotta find the book, but it actually is really beautiful. This idea that it's like facing these demons and personify. Well, not really personifying them. Well, sort of. Yeah, like giving them a chair and sitting across from you, and finding out, well, what is it you want, and then if you could identify what exactly this demon or this ghost is desiring of you, that you feed it that so that it doesn't feed off of you.
Yeah.
And then it dissolves, or in some instances becomes something else beautiful, like an animal or something. It's actually really, really interesting process. A healer in New York told me about this book and this process, and it's, yeah, if I've gotta find the book.
It's okay. Feeding Your Demons. That's awesome. And then in Healing and Recovery, I did want to mention this real quick, that David R. Hawkins talked about that guilt is the energetic vibration that actually invites epidemics, that plagues will spread in the energy of guilt. And like, that's a whole other conversation about spread, because that's not, I don't mean that actually physically, because I'm sure most of you guys know that that's my work, is in showing the mechanisms of how this whole idea of physical contagion has never been proven scientifically. And then all these stories, create, they are fear mongering stories that just that fuel guilt. They create these guilts, and that literally attracts these cleansing, these detoxification, dramatic, kind of dark nights of the soul in the physical body, these illness events. And then we all think it's because, we coughed and sneezed on each other. But David R. Hawkins, like years ago, talked about this, that actually the vibrational energy of guilt, it resonates at a certain vibration. And that actually is when it gets to a certain number, that's when it's a prime time for a plague. So that can so easily be manipulated by these screens and these stories and these media things and these institutions that teach us these, truths or scientific truths. So, so guilt is very, very powerful. But it's low vibration. It's not really powerful, actually. It's super low vibration. It has a very specific resonance, and we all attract it because we all hold it. So we really want to see it when it's there and neutralize it with, like, I love Angel's method. Neutralize it, right? So what's the opposite of I'm scared of everybody's germs? And you'll find lots of truth of that. How many times have you sipped your kid's cup when they were sick, or snuggled them with their pink eye all over you, and like, you didn't get it, right? So these are, we're just scratching the surface with these topics, but like, thank you. This is like a dream come true to be able to have a space to share this in. And you guys are just like so amazing for being here and showing up for it and hanging in. And I'll see you next month, second Sunday of the month. November, and then we'll see you this week at Soul to Soil. All right, you guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Night. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, guys.